I didn't attend my son's wedding. I instead spent the evening with his ex wife. Quick backstory. After graduating high school, my son moved 3 states away for college. At 19, he married a girl he met. I tried convincing him to wait because I personally felt he was too immature. They both dropped out and moved back here to his hometown. At 20, they had their first child, a beautiful little girl. 16 months later, my daughter in law gave birth to their second child, a little boy. After the first baby, my wife and I noticed our daughter in law wasn't happy. We both thought it was postpartum depression related. Just after the second arrived, my son and his wife separated. She would bring the kids over for a visit. It was then that she began unloading on us. I know there's two sides to every story, but considering I know my son, I believed her. I sat my son down numerous times to speak with him regarding his marriage. He refused to take responsibility, blamed her for everything, even when I directly pointed out where he was the sole problem. They got into counseling, and for a year, things were okay on the surface. Our daughter-in-law filed for divorce. My son, 3 days later, was on Facebook announcing his new girlfriend. A month later, they were engaged. My son had forced his then-wife to become a permanent stay-at-home mom at the birth of their first child. She, of course, had no other family or friends here. She knew no one aside from us. She had nowhere to go with 2 small children. Unbeknownst to our son, my wife and I helped her financially and got her an apartment. Before the divorce was even finalized, we received a wedding invitation. I made it clear to my son I would not be attending and they would not have my blessings. His mother told him that she would see to it that I would attend. I stayed consistent in my decision. I also asked him not to bring his fiancée around our house out of respect for the mother of his children. The wedding happened. The night before, my wife gave me the final push. I did not attend. Our daughter also did not attend for the same reasons. My wife picked up our grandkids, got them dressed, and attended the wedding. My daughter and I decided to spend the evening with his ex. I couldn't imagine her sitting alone while her kids attended their father's wedding. She was taken aback that I didn't end up attending his wedding. We took her out to distract her mind. I just wanted her to know that she'll always be considered family to us. My daughter also made a joke they can drop the in-law status and just be sisters now. She was very tearfully grateful. I realized just how badly she needed our support, and specifically on that night. The next morning, my son called to tell me how much of a horrible father I am for not attending his wedding. A few days later, he caught wind that I spent the wedding evening with his ex. He said that was the ultimate form of betrayal, and further, myself and his sister would have to earn a relationship with him on his terms only. I love this because just because your son is your son does not mean you have to support all of his actions. You gotta call him out when they're wrong. And you gotta stick with what's right. You know? I don't give a shit who you're marrying. You screw someone else in the meanwhile, like, I'm not gonna be okay with that. He didn't even let his divorce get finalized before he was marrying another chick. Like, priorities. You have 2 children you need to take care of. You're okay with your baby mama and your kids not having a home, being all alone just so you can get remarried? Like, huh?
Am I in the wrong for doting on my buddy's pregnant wife? My best friend Chris and I are both expecting our first babies with our wives. My wife is 36-ish weeks pregnant, and I believe Chris's wife, Polly, is somewhere around 28 weeks. Chris and I are very different in how we treat our wives with their pregnancies. Like, Chris still has Polly do a lot, whereas I will take the weight off my wife in literally any single possible way that I can, even small things. Mainly because I feel utterly useless and I don't want my wife straining herself to do things I could easily do myself while she's growing my baby and uncomfortable anyway. But I guess I messed up the other day. So Chris and Polly invited us out to their boat to go swimming and fishing. My wife was a bit uncomfortable because she's getting close to her due date and is just afraid of going into early labor, so her anxiety has been a bit heavier than usual. Well, Chris kept asking Polly to get up and do shit for him, and I would go right behind her and be like, no, sit down, I've got it. And essentially did the same thing I would do with my own wife. Well, there's a store along the lake that we stopped off at so I could grab some beers, and Polly asked me to grab her a few things, so I did. A mixture of both snacks and drinks, like 4 to 5 items. When I got back to the boat, my wife looked in the bag I got and was immediately pissed off and didn't talk to anyone for easily an hour. I had no idea why she was so upset, so when we stopped off and Chris and Polly jumped in to swim, I asked what was wrong, and she's like, pretty effing pathetic, you get her literally everything she asked for and you couldn't even get me the one thing that I asked for. I told her that I didn't hear her ask for anything, and she said, yeah, because you were so busy doting on someone else's pregnant wife that you couldn't pay attention to what your own wife was saying. I truly didn't hear her. But then Chris gets back to the boat a bit later and looks at my wife and says, where's your drink? And my wife just glared at me. So apparently my buddy heard my wife, but I didn't, which of course just adds fuel to my wife's anger because it looks really bad. I was right beside my wife and Chris was on the other side of the boat, so I should have heard her. Later on in the night, she told me that she's never been so uncomfortable in her life because Polly and Chris both noticed I didn't get my wife the one thing that she asked for after getting Polly everything that she asked for, so it embarrassed her. And that she's not comfortable with me doting on Chris's wife at all, and that she doesn't want to hang out with them for a while because she's now insecure over this. I was just trying to be nice. So am I in the wrong here?
Am I wrong for not taking down our 12-foot skeleton because a neighbor's son is afraid of it? Okay, so we moved to this neighborhood back in April and have been making so many plans for Halloween decorations. I've always wanted the giant skeleton, and if you're not familiar, just search 12-foot skeleton and you'll find it. So I finally ordered one and we put it up September 1st because I was just too excited to wait. People on my street all laughed about it and the teens down the street came to take pictures. And my next door neighbor is even gonna make stuff to go with it. Unfortunately, there's younger kids who are a few streets away who see it on their walk home from school. And one even cried and got scared of it. So the mom approached me and asked if I could possibly take it down because it's a little too scary. But in my opinion, it's not scary. It's actually silly, and I don't like scary Halloween. I like silly Halloween. I don't even listen to true crime podcasts like every other basic girl these days. So I asked the mom if putting a silly hat on it would work. Am I wrong for not taking down our 12-foot skeleton because a neighbor's son is afraid of it? She said no and again asked for me to take it down. I told her I've wanted one of these forever and I'm not taking it down. I suggested she find a different way to the bus stop and she made a face and said, "Really?" I told her I spent $300 on this bad boy and I do want to enjoy it. And not to sound too dramatic, but in this world on fire, something as stupid as a 12-foot skeleton brings me joy. That's when she looked behind me smirking, saying $300 shouldn't have broke the bank. But judging by the house you chose, I should have realized that money was the issue. Then she said, but it costs nothing to be kind to a little boy who's just scared. I'm not particularly clever or quick, so I just said okay, thanks for the suggestion, and went back to weeding. Then she stood there taking a picture, probably to blast me on social media or her mommy groups. Now whenever she walks by, she scowls and takes another picture. Am I wrong? Am I wrong for getting a hotel room for my spouse, me and my daughter, instead of forcing her to share a bed with her cousins? I normally get along really well with my in-laws and find my mother-in-law to be awesome. My sister-in-laws, brother-in-laws, everyone are just great people. We were headed out that way to go spend some time before school starts again, and it lined up with when 2 other families were coming into town. This meant the bedrooms we'd normally stay in were packed. And while my husband and I had a room and a bed, our daughter Cass 8 didn't have a spot to herself. So my sister-in-law suggested that she just double up with her cousins. Cass was not happy about this and said she didn't want to. She was pretty adamant about it and has never shared a bed with anyone, and I wasn't about to force her. I figured that us leaving to get a hotel a few miles away would free up some space and make it easier on everyone. They were all taken aback by this and kept telling me it made no sense and was spending money when they didn't need to. Am I wrong for getting a hotel for my spouse, me and my daughter, instead of forcing her to share a bed with cousins? I said I know it's fine, but that Cass isn't comfortable and I'm not going to force her. They kept pushing back, saying that all girls share beds and more stuff on how girls are used to seeing each other change. They emphasized that it's normal and it's weird for us to be upset about it, and they also asked why was she so uncomfortable. And one of them even asked her in a way that's meant to guilt, like, why does this even make you uncomfortable? Don't you want to spend time with your cousins? We ended up getting the hotel room, but they brought it up every day and kept almost making fun of my daughter, indicating that she's both weird and spoiled. I've never in my life shared a bed with anyone other than someone I'm romantic with. Even as a kid, I'd never get a shared bed. I didn't even change around girls except for in gym class. And generally, even in gym, I'd change in the restroom because it felt really inappropriate. I didn't think it was weird, but the entire family, the women at least, do. Am I wrong for telling my daughter that life doesn't stop for others just because hers isn't going well? I have 3 kids, and my daughter, 27 female, hasn't had the best luck in her romantic life. She's gotten cheated on so many times and her previous relationships were unhealthy. I also believe she's in a toxic relationship with her current boyfriend. My nieces and nephews, along with my other kids, are happily married and some starting their own families. Because it was recently my sister's birthday, she and her husband had planned a trip for the family. She helped with expenses if needed, but for the most part, everyone paid for themselves. And my daughter was the only one going by herself. We do things as a family and then also do things with just our partners. So sometimes my daughter was by herself or basically a third wheel. At the end of the trip, my daughter complained and said she hated the trip. She said it felt like a cruel joke that she was the only one by herself and that others shouldn't have been so affectionate with their partners. And this isn't the first time, so I told her just because her life isn't going well doesn't mean others stop their lives.